Welcome to the All-Star Athlete Podcast, your guide to mastering the mental game and reaching your full potential. Today's sponsor is Well Traveled. Whether you're grinding through long days, pushing your limits in training, or constantly on the move, your body takes a toll. Fatigue, hectic schedules, and changing environments can weaken your immune system. Give it a boost with Well Traveled, a drink mix with clean, clinically proven ingredients for immunity and no added sugar. It's a smarter alternative to Emergen-C. Just open a packet, mix with water, and enjoy. Right now, save 25% when you use the code ALLSTAR on the Well Traveled website. That's gowelltraveled.com/discount/AllStar. Again, save 25% when you use the code ALLSTAR on their website. Stay well on the go with Well Traveled. If you've been listening to the podcast and you've found the episodes to be informative and or interesting, I encourage you to subscribe to the podcast. I will be releasing episodes weekly, so subscribing to the podcast is the best way to stay up to speed on when the new episodes are released and to make sure that you don't miss any of the content. Also, liking each episode, if you have in fact been enjoying the content, as well as leaving any questions or comments that you may have down below, also go a long way in supporting the podcast. So thank you so much for listening and enjoy the show.
Today, our guest is former NCAA Division II basketball player Brennan Wheeler. And to kick things off for the podcast today, we're going to do a little bit of a rapid fire round of questions to get to know Brennan a little bit here. So we're just going to jump right in. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions in, 1 to 2 sentences. You can have a little fun with it, but go ahead and give me kind of the first thing that comes to mind for these questions here, and then we'll just go from there. Cool?
Let's rock and roll.
So the first question is, throughout the course of your career as a basketball player, what would you say is the most overrated drill in basketball?
I've done a lot of crazy drills from playing basketball for about 16 years, because I started when I was 8 competitively. I tend to be obnoxiously optimistic with a lot of stuff where I can kind of see the reason in a drill, even if it feels silly. But there was one drill we did at Chico, and hopefully this doesn't make it back to Coach Klink, but we had to work on tracing the ball. So if you're pressuring the ball and you're trying to play good one-on-one defense and not, let him drive by you, disrupt his rhythm. We did a drill where you literally are almost chest to chest with your opponent. It's stationary, no one's dribbling, and you literally are just yelling the word ball, and your hands are tracing wherever your partner moves the ball. And we never spent days or weeks on this drill, but whenever we did it, I was like, gosh, we just got to get through this drill to the next one. So that'd probably have to be my answer.
Okay. Sounds like that would be pretty entertaining for an outside observer. You're just screaming ball and tracing your hands around where the other person's moving the ball around. Is that right?
Well, it's entertaining if the person who's participating in the drill is buying in and doing it, even though it is not fun to do.
Yeah.
It's not very entertaining when the person that's doing it is oh God, I hate this. And you just kind of move your hands.
Just going through the motions.
Exactly. Yeah.
For sure. All right. Question number 2. What was your go-to cheat meal when you were playing college basketball, and is it still the same now?
Yeah, I would say it's the same now, even though I'm honestly better about my nutrition now than I was as an athlete, because especially with the resources in D2, we don't have a team dietitian, a team nutritionist, those type of things that a lot of players have access to, especially now with the amount of money going into college basketball. But the metabolism is so crazy, because you're working out hours a day, you're always active. I didn't really game a lot in college or in high school, and so that took away even more time from just sitting and not burning through whatever I was eating. So I would definitely say a milkshake or anything ice cream related. That's when I've eaten well, and I'm ready for something sweet, the milkshake will always get me where I need to be.
All right, for sure. The milkshake always hits. What flavor?
I like chocolate, old classic, reliable. I used to be like a huge cookies and cream, which I still will never say no to. But when the time comes and there's a ton of options, I will always rely on a chocolate shake.
Okay. Bonus question. In-N-Out burger, yes or no?
Absolutely. Till the day I die.
Okay. All right, for sure. That's actually kind of a split question. A lot of people like, because I love In-N-Out burger, but a lot of people are like, oh, Whataburger, or I don't know what these other chains are, like other parts of the country, but
you don't need to know because they're not that important.
Yeah.
In-N-Out is the one.
Yeah.
And anyone who says different is just close-minded.
For sure. Okay. Next question. Which teammate had the weirdest pregame ritual, and did it actually work?
To be honest, everyone, especially when I was at Chico, like in high school, people didn't really have routines. Like you'd stretch, you'd shoot, and then you just go out there and play. So in college, everyone was just kind of like in their own space. And pretty much everyone had headphones in, listening to their own playlist, their own music. Their stretch, foam roll, like all the normal stuff. I did have one teammate who, I won't name his name, but he had to have like socks from either the week of practice or the previous game, like unwashed as the first layer, and then double sock with another layer, like a clean pair, which was pretty weird.
And was he a baller? Like, was he putting up numbers or what?
Yeah, like I don't know if that was the thing that made him perform well, but yeah, like he was very solid.
Okay, for sure. All right, next question. Did you talk more trash to your teammates during practice or opponents during games?
Oh, I like this question. I was always the player who, like, I was more than willing to talk trash. I just had to like get going in the game or the practice. Like I would never really just walk out of the locker room talking trash as like my personality. But if I made a tough shot or I made a good play or I like took like a physical foul or something like that, that would definitely get like the competitive juices going. So definitely my teammates, because you see them way more, and our practices, like a lot of successful programs, were much harder than the games. Suffice to say, we had a few really, really tough games, but the practices were always harder. And, you know, like you got to rely on anything to get through it and like perform at a good enough level or a great level. So if you got to start talking trash, then that's what you got to do. And there's no love lost. Like everyone walks out of there, no hard feelings, but yeah, like the trash was definitely talked, and you could actually work on it and like get better at it in practice, so that if you had to in a game to throw someone else off, you know, you could be ready for that.
All right, for sure. And your teammates would probably agree then too, huh?
Yeah, I mean, some of them like just, well, yeah, most of them would find their time to talk trash, but I don't know what they would say, like, because some of them, like, when you get into the game, it feels different, and so that you're like, you know, that's the opposition, and so you're more willing to like go at them.
Yeah, it's more hostile. Like, there's no love lost there. Like, you don't care about this guy.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I actually used the term "no love lost" incorrectly when I was talking about practice. I meant like no hard feelings, but
yeah, for sure. No, I followed you.
I would definitely say some of them, like once you get into the game, there's another level that you get to.
Yeah. All right, last question. What was your go-to pump-up song before a game? And it's okay if it's Taylor Swift.
Oh, come on now. No.
No judgment.
I do not get fired up to Taylor Swift at all. I definitely like some of her music for all the Swifties out there.
Let's go.
She's got some great songs. So I'm not the type of person that's like, no, I don't listen to Taylor Swift ever. But that is on the bottom of the list as far as what's happening pregame. I like this question because I rely on music heavily, like whether it be for athletic performance, exercise, you know, like commuting, working, any of that stuff. And so we would always, like, our coach in college would always preach to us, like, whatever you have to do to work yourself into like a almost crazy competitive edge so that you're ready when you step out there. Do whatever that is. And so I have a couple different pregame playlists. I made one specifically when we won the West Region Championship. I titled it March Madness because it's only appropriate. But I also had a playlist called Showtime, which is like a bunch of hip hop songs that are literally tailor made to like get you going. So Intro by Meek Mill on his Championships album is always going to do it. And then there's a song by Future called News or something. And that one always does it too. Whether I'm going to practice, to a game, a workout, always gets me going.
All right. Perfect. Well, without further ado, then, let's actually jump into sort of the formal questions of today's interview. That was a brief little...
Before we do that, what's your like go-to song? We want to hear from you.
You know, great question, actually. So I am big on the music as well. And from a sports psychology perspective, I like to use music to both amp myself up and calm myself down. So like if I'm working out, for example, at the gym, like I'm a personal trainer, I like lifting weights. But sometimes you're just like a little too overactivated and like the sympathetic nervous system is just going like a little too heavy. Like if you're lifting really heavy, you're hot, you're sweaty, you're going for like a PR on deadlifts or something, or maybe you're just like, you've had a little bit too much activation that day. Like I'll chill it out a little bit, kind of, you know,
or too much pre-workout.
Too much pre-work, too much caffeine, whatever it is, like feel like you're about to have a panic attack. So actually, one thing that people may not know about me is I'm kind of a big nerd. Actually, this format of the podcast, you can actually see some of my artwork, I think, on the wall back there.
It's awesome.
Yeah. And so actually, a lot of the music that I listen to when I'm working out is video game related, which is
cool.
kind of interesting. I'm a pretty big gamer. Don't game nearly as much as I used to, but I listen to a lot of like video game remixes, which is kind of an answer that you don't hear from a lot of people. But I think that video game
unique.
music is very underrated, like the Halo soundtrack, you know, that kind of stuff. Like if anybody, I mean, probably most listeners that are listening to this have heard the Halo soundtrack before. Like
that's the first thing I thought of when you said that.
Yep. Like it's like, oh, that's a vibe right there. So that's actually what I go to when I'm trying to get amped up. Either that or like rap or something. You know, G-Eazy, E40, like West Coast rap kind of stuff.
Yes.
Eminem,
nice.
Kendrick Lamar a little bit, Drake. Although I know a lot of people are probably split on those two rappers in particular. But
I love how you put those back to back as names.
Yeah. I mean,
I love the Halo thing. I love the Halo thing.
So yeah, that's probably my go-to.
No, that's cool because, like I said, it's unique, and a lot of people rely on like Meek Mill, Eminem, all those artists, which they serve their role. Like it's perfect pump up music, but it is cool to hear like what gets people going outside the norm.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's get into it here. The scope of this podcast being mental performance and mental struggles throughout the course of your career and anything else that we may talk about along the way. But outside of that brief introduction that we had into your personality, I would love it if you could start by introducing yourself a little bit more fully, where you're from, your athletic journey, kind of walking us through that whole period of your life up until now. You know, not super long-winded or anything, but just kind of where you're from and your athletic career, kind of up through playing basketball at California State University, Chico.
Yeah, for sure. So for those of you that don't know me, I am from Placerville, California, which is a small, very old town on the way up from Sacramento to Lake Tahoe. Beautiful place. I was homeschooled up until my sophomore year of high school. Basketball started getting more serious. I knew I was going to have to start competing at a school and try to get a scholarship to go to a school so that I could pay for college, play at the level that I wanted to. So I started at a high school called Ponderosa High School in Chico Springs, California. Did sophomore, junior, senior year there. Had a great time. Like, it was a big adjustment, stepping into a big social setting, which was nice because I didn't know then, but I was going to go to Chico, which is also an extremely social environment. So then I went to Chico. I got a scholarship. I got very fortunate that, you play on the circuit, you play, tournament after tournament, weekend after weekend to try to get recruited. And one of our Chico assistant coaches was able to see a really good game on Vine. And at that point in time, I was literally sending like 5 emails a day with tape and introductions to schools that I was just trying to get, some looks from. And so Chico started very actively recruiting me. I signed, I think it was October or September of my senior year of high school. So I knew before our season that I was going, which was a great, like, for people that have gotten recruited and also people that don't know, like, that's a great spot to be in because a lot of pressure gets taken off your shoulders. You're able to play freely, not worry about injury, not worry about performance. Some people like to wait for like better options if you have a really good senior season. But that worked really well for what I was looking for. Then I went to Chico. For those that don't know, the men's basketball program under Coach Klink, he likes to redshirt every freshman that comes in so that they can adjust to life away from home, adjust to school, adjust to the pace of competing at a D2 level. So I redshirted, and then we'll get into this later, but I had a big knee injury right after my freshman year. So, that held me out my entire sophomore year. So it was considered a medical redshirt. And that following year was my junior year. We had a really good season. And then COVID hit. So that was another year off. And then the injury opened me up to getting my master's degree. So when all was said and done, I had 6 years at Chico, undergraduate in exercise physiology, master's in kinesiology. After the year of COVID, we were able to come back, compete, win a West Region championship, which is definitely a top highlight in my 26 years of living. That was an amazing experience. And then wrapped up at Chico. My oldest brother has lived in Chicago for 7 years now. And so once I finished my degree, I moved out to Chicago to be with him, work. And that kind of is where I landed now.
Okay, so you went to Chico State, you redshirted. Did you get injured during your redshirt year, or you got injured the first year after that, which was your first like legitimate like freshman year?
Both, actually. So during my redshirt freshman year, first year in college, I sprained my MCL in October, and then rehabbed that. It wasn't a huge deal, didn't have to do surgery, but it did take a little bit of time. And so I rehabbed that after Christmas break. I was fully good to go. And I had a great spring. I was actually feeling physically the best I'd ever felt. And then it was about 2 or 3 weeks into the summer after my freshman year, which is when the big knee injury happened. So fractured cartilage in my knee. ACL was partially damaged, and so that kind of contributed to why the knee got hurt. So that was the big injury, but it was kind of stemmed from that first MCL.
Okay. And how did that injury happen?
The first one or the big one?
Both.
So the first one, and I know he feels so bad, but it was in practice, and it was my best friend on the team. We were doing like a rebounding drill, I think. I was boxing someone out. One of our bigs put like a pretty good shoulder into my buddy Josh. He fell, and like his entire body fell on the outside of my right knee. So you can kind of picture it. The knee bends in with another person, running into it. So that's how the first one happened. And then the cartilage injury, which was the big one, was actually non-contact. I was playing at a pro-am at American River College in Sacramento with a couple Chico teammates, actually. And I was like on a fast break. I went right, left, and I just felt my right knee go. And I knew it was bad.
And you suspect that second injury was from residual sort of damage from that MCL injury to begin with. So there was like kind of a structural weakened state, and your knee just kind of buckled and gave out on you.
I suspect it. I don't have like a ton of grounds, especially now that I'm like in the world of sports medicine. So like I kind of understand it at a better level. So I suspect it. When the MCL was sprained slash torn, um, I was told that there was partial damage to the ACL because your ACL is like a spindle. You got like three parts to the ACL, and if one is compromised, then it leaves it less structurally sound. And so, but when they went in and did the invasive surgery on the cartilage, I was told that the ACL looked great. But that surgery was over a year after the MCL injury. So who's to say? We'll never really know.
Okay. Either way, I believe you mentioned either off the air or earlier that the injury sidelined you for 12 to 16 months.
Yep.
So
16.
can you talk about physically and mentally what that process was like? You know, the amount of pain, the recovery process. Did it change your outlook on the game at all?
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'm grateful for this platform because I think a lot of athletes go through injuries and don't really know what to make of it, have a hard time bouncing back, have a hard time getting through the actual process of I'm going to be away from my sport. I got to do what I need to do to make sure my body is right, and as well as my mental state. So it was very tough, very tough. Like I'll precede it by saying, when I was in the later stage of return to play protocol, I kind of started, the physical was coming around and starting to feel better, and I was starting to get there. But the mental, like when you're away from the sport and you're not competing in competition speed, you find a rhythm when you do competition over and over and over, and you get a good feel for your sport. So I knew that mentally speaking, once I was able to be like grateful for the injury and not be angry about it or like resentful, once I was able to like actually embrace it, be grateful for it, see the good in it, that was when I would be completely like 100% ready to return to sport, even though I was still like playing games, physically I was back. So I think that's a pretty like interesting thing because it's very hard to have that perspective when you're in the thick of it. A lot of people will come around to that, years down the road. So it was kind of a weird like realization where I was like, this feels right. Like when I am over the injury is going to be when I'm mentally there as well as physically. So it was nice to have that perspective. No one really like told me that verbatim. But just from a lot of, hours in the rehab room, doing my own stuff in the gym, thinking about coming back to the sport, being impatient, all of those thoughts that fly through your head. I think that's what helped me come around to that. So, yeah, it was tough, like when you're out from your sport for a long time, it's not just let me get my actual joint healthy and then I'll be exactly who I was. I was definitely motivated to come back more athletic, more mobile, better performer than I was previous to the injury, which I think is a good way to approach an injury, like trying to be better than when you were before it instead of just trying to get back to even. But yeah, like it's a full package when you have sustain a major injury. There's sprained ankles, there's stress fractures, there's, stuff here and there that you can get back from if you have the right people around you. But a big injury, it's not just physical. You're going to feel a lot of emotions. Mentally, you're going to be a little lost, wonder, why did this happen to me? Couldn't I have just, stayed healthy? Did I do something wrong? Like all those questions fly through your head. And it's important to realize, this is a holistic return to your sport, not just one aspect of that.
Did you rely on anyone during that time, like a therapist or teammates or coaches or friends or family to help you stay positive, or were you just kind of isolated?
Relied on people big time. Like I was 19 years old. So like, you know, emotional maturity, knowing that your support system is where the value is and you have to rely on them. Those weren't exactly thoughts that were going through my head, but like when you have the right people around you, they can recognize, this person's a little withdrawn. They're going through a tough time. We got to help out where we can. So it's kind of yes to both of those things. Like I isolated myself because I was going through it, but like when I'm on crutches, I had my housemates, roommates, and teammates drive me to class. Like that was so big when at the time I was just so like upset that I needed that help. I wanted to be independent. But literally like my roommates took turns driving me to class. Like that's such a small yet huge thing. And then family for sure, like phone calls with parents, my brothers, sisters, my teammates were huge, like super encouraging, always telling me I was going to be back, keeping me involved, like for that 16 months, I wasn't exactly like incapacitated for the whole time. Like I was on crutches for 3, trying to, get my functional skills back, like walking, running, all that stuff. But for the majority of that time off from the sport, I was still able to like move around. So teammates keeping me involved with practice. I think I traveled to a couple games that year. I think I went up to Humboldt and I think I went to San Francisco, which were not things that, they had to do by any means. But the coaches brought me because they wanted to just keep me involved. It was a long process. I also like my redshirt year, I was looking good, like a good prospect, someone that was going to contribute a lot to the program. So I think they knew like, we need to do what we need to do to like help him get him back to where he was, keep him in a good mental state. So long-winded answer, but yeah, tons of people that played a role in helping me.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they wanted you to continue to stay bought into the program. I mean, they invested in you. You had a scholarship. They recruited you. You were looking good. You got injured, unfortunately. These things happen to people. But it sounds like your teammates really cared about you and supported you and driving you to class and keeping you involved. And then, your coaches, if they wanted you to come to some of the games to keep you involved, right? And to go back to what you said earlier about you wanted to come back stronger and more mobile and better than before the injury, which I think is a good positive way to look at it. So those things are all great as far as your basketball journey, because it can be difficult. We might talk about this a little bit later, or maybe just in the next question I'm about to ask you. But when you identify as a basketball player, which maybe not 100% did you identify as a basketball player, and we're going to get into that, it can be extremely difficult mentally, physically, emotionally when you are injured and you are no longer with the team, you're no longer playing. You might face some uncertainty about whether or not you are ever going to play again, if your spot's going to get taken, or physically, am I going to get healthy enough to come back to the team? So that's a lot of adversity that you had to face. Now, adding on top of that adversity, following your injury, your 2 injuries, right? The MCL and then the cartilage injury, right? COVID happened during the course of when you were at California State University, Chico, which shut down all competitive athletics for, I think it was a year, right? Like it was a full calendar year.
Yeah, it was for some teams 2 seasons because of that weird timeline where it hit in the spring.
Yeah, it was like half
Right.
of a season and then.
Yeah.
So how long was Chico State competitive basketball canceled for, officially and or unofficially? Like, were you not allowed to participate?
So March when COVID hit and it hit everywhere, like we went into lockdown and all that stuff. We excuse me, we had driven down to the NCAA tournament in San Diego. So that was, I don't know, March 20th, 22nd, maybe something like that. And then from that time until we stepped back on the court together, I think was a calendar year, because we did some spring workouts in 2021 where you had to wear the mask and you only had a
Non-contact,
certain...
wear the mask, all that kind of stuff.
and you're only allowed a certain amount of people in the gym, so we had to like have groups of players come in together, which I think they tried, if I remember correctly, to have the people that lived together or in close proximity, them be a group and come in together. So even though, we all seen each other outside of like workouts, but
Yeah.
it was close. I don't have the dates in my head, but close to a calendar year where we did nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was that like for you stepping away from the game again? I mean, this time it was both times it was really forced, but it was like for a different reason, right? With COVID-19 as opposed to the injury. Like, what was that like for you to step away from basketball? And we actually have had an interview before for a separate project, and I'm recalling that you took advantage of that time to find some other passions. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head where it's like, yeah, the sport was taken away again, but it was for a completely different reason. So definitely a more like communal experience instead of like lonely experience, because the injury was me, right? Like there wasn't really any teammate that was in the same boat as me or anyone that was like experiencing the exact same thing. But with COVID, like everyone was in the same boat. No one knew what to think. No one had answers for the first few months, or even longer. So it was wild. Like we drove back from San Diego from the NCAA tournament the day after we had just driven down there, and we were like, "What is going on? Why? Like, let's just play the games and then get out of here." But we thought, a lot of students at that time thought it was going to be an extended spring break, and we just come back to school after it was figured out. But the first few months were tough because people wouldn't stay at school. Everyone was at home with their parents or wherever they lived. And so from March pretty much through the summer, I was back in Placerville, California with my parents. My oldest sister was at home with us. And then I had two of like my best friends from growing up that I was able to like, I went over to one of their houses and my other buddy came with so that we could like finish our school year because we were all in school at the same time. So then, throughout the summer, rules were always changing, whether you could be in certain places without a mask or with a mask. Like it was just so crazy. And then a lot of us came back to school in August of 2021 because, 2020, August of 2020.
That was probably online at that time, right? I don't think it was back in person,
Yes.
Was it?
Yeah, we just came back to like school because we were paying rent at our house and like.
Oh, like you physically moved back to the Chico area.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So, that was nice to be back around everyone, even though we didn't have classes in person or our sports. But I say this a lot to like people when we look back at COVID. I think a lot of people had it tougher than me and some of my friends. Like I realize, a lot of people lost family members, friends, they lost jobs, like they're isolated because maybe you lived in a certain part of the country that was extremely strict, right? Like major big cities. But for me personally and a couple of my friends, we were able to navigate it in such a way that like it really wasn't that bad. It was tough to be away from the sport because that's what we're conditioned to do. Once for basketball players, September rolls around, you're doing preseason workouts, you're getting ready for the season, everyone's excited. But it really wasn't that bad because we were able to spend time with each other more than we really ever had because we were always either in class or at the sport. So we made the most of it, like you said, we were able to kind of step outside our identities, get outside, learn some new things. I remember we played a lot of grass volleyball during COVID because it's outside, smaller group. Relatively, it's pretty safe for that time period. So it was really fun to like just be outside with friends and play a sport, even if it wasn't basketball. I'm trying to think of other things that I picked up. I think this is something we may talk about later, but COVID was when I started journaling and doing like meditating and pre-sleep stretch like routines, because when I first went home in March, April of 2020, I was having a really poor time sleeping. The world was just in a really crazy spot, and like friends and family, social media, like there's just so many crazy like things flying around that you don't know are true or not. And so that definitely disrupted mine and a lot of like my family and friends just normal routine of being able to get good rest, get up, exercise, do our job or our classes in school. So I was like, I hate not being able to sleep well. Like this is weird. It's new for me because I always slept well. So that was when I started getting into like journaling, meditating a little bit, like a routine that I still use before I go to sleep now of just a couple quick stretches so that I can let my body relax. And that was a big like foundational part of something that's long lasting in my routine now, that I learned in the moment just because I kind of needed to. Like I needed to figure out a way to express like some thoughts and emotions, in a journal, in a space where I could just kind of like word vomit and get it all out, and then be able to like calm myself, find a little bit of peace, a little bit of relaxation, with the stretching and the meditation. So yeah, there was a lot of stuff going on when COVID hit.
So it sounds like you were able to have some positive takeaways from COVID, which is obviously a great thing. Neither of us is going to sit here and say that COVID was a good thing, and obviously it had some significantly serious impacts on people's lives and people's health, and potentially still ongoing, right? If people lost loved ones or they're dealing with symptoms of long COVID or whatever the case may be. But it sounds like there were some positive takeaways there in terms of some mental performance techniques, some meditation, some stretching, some journaling that you're carrying with you today. And you also mentioned finding some other activities, playing the grass volleyball, spending some more time with your friends. Was it around that time that you realized that you had more of an identity than just as an athlete? And did that mindset help you as a person both on and off the court?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. Like I think a lot of my friends who were athletes would also say similar things where, when you're all in it together and you don't really know what's going on, but you can't play the sport that you've always played competitively, like you were expecting to for a year, you kind of have to like, all right, well, what else? How else are we going to spend our time? Like,
what else is there?
What else,
a lot of athletes like seriously ask that question, like seriously, like what else is there? Like a lot of athletes just don't even know. Like all they know is their sport.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say like the circle I was in, and specifically myself, was less on that spectrum of like really not knowing what else there was, because, like we would like to go out, have fun with each other, play games at the house, like a lot of different things outside of just doing the sport. So we knew that there was like other things to do. But it was a little bit of like a world rocker where we actually have the time to do the things that we would other else be doing, like spike ball or card games or going on a hike or, going to a trip to like Tahoe or something like that. So it was nice because we realized early in that school year, which was my senior year of my undergrad, 2020 to 2021, we have a little bit of time. We don't know when our sport's going to come back, but we do know that it's not looking great. So what else can we do? How can we, enjoy the time that we have together? Because I think everyone I was around was coming back for their 5th year. But some people were unsure about that. Like maybe they were just going to graduate in 4 and be done with it and just start their professional lives or do something else. So we were aware that like, okay, this may last for a longer time than we think, but what we have is like right now. And so we had a ton of game nights at the house, which were so fun because I lived in a large house, 5 bedrooms with teammates. So we would have friends over all the time. Not to say like during COVID we were having parties at all, but like we're having
Don't
like our
worry,
close
this
knit.
is a safe space. It's not getting back to Chico.
Yeah. Also, we're like 5 years removed, so it was a long time ago.
Of
But
course, yeah. Let's be
yeah, like
honest. Pretty much everybody was having people over to the house.
yeah, yeah, they were, and it was so weird to be told that you couldn't do that. Like it was so strange.
Well,
But
like all the bars were closed. I mean, if you were
yeah,
21, which I don't know if you were at the time or not, but like a lot of your teammates probably were. And like for those people that aren't in the know, like Chico State is like a big party school. So there's a lot of like frats and sororities. And outside of that, there's a lot of like pretty prominently attended, bars and
yeah,
I don't know if you could call them clubs really in Chico, but you know what I mean. So
probably
people are
not.
just
But
like, yeah, go over to like house parties and stuff, and everybody wanted that college experience. They wanted the social experience of going to college, especially at a place like Chico where there's not really a lot around. The closest big city to Chico is Sacramento, which is like an hour and a half away. So if you went to school there, you were going out there and you were socializing there.
yeah, for sure. And you're 100% right. Like we were looking for things to do socially because that was the environment we had just spent 4 years in or 3 years in. Like we expected to be able to compete in our sport, hang out with our friends, go have fun. These are the best years of our lives, like all that kind of stuff. So, we, like I said, we made the most of it. Like some of the best nights during that tumultuous time were when we would have game nights at the house, like play cards, play poker, play like a couple different games that we fell in love with, like within our team or our friends. And those were like big on building the friendships because we were close with people for those first 3 years. But when you have a limited amount of time to spend outside your team, you can only get to know them so much, especially when like you're going out and seeing them in social settings most of the time instead of like, hanging out at the house, doing normal things together. And so that was an opportunity for us to like really tighten our circle, get close with our people, rely on each other because COVID was happening, but of course life happens too. So like, people are going through different things relationship wise and family wise. And so that was a time where we got we got close over 3 years. And then it felt like those 3 years of time were packed into another 1 year of getting closer, like at a sped up rate. And so once that fourth year passed and we kind of were able to come back to school, everyone was like just so aware of that fifth year being pretty much our last year as a big friend group together before a lot of us graduated. So it was just a good like timestamp for us to know, let's be present, let's enjoy each other's company, let's have a good time, let's try not to worry about these big things like COVID that are mostly out of our control. And so that was a good like be where your feet are kind of moment.
Right. Just be in the moment and enjoy who you're with and where you are and what you can control. I mean, I heard you say that COVID was like mostly out of your control. I'd probably argue that it's like completely out of your control, whether or not the school was going to open back up or whether or not you were even, I mean, at that time, like you were saying, some of your teammates were on their fourth, maybe fifth year, like where they were considering like, do I take another academic year and take advantage of this sort of COVID redshirt year? Do I try and come back and play? Like nobody knew at the time, like when competitive return to play was going to be. There was a huge amount of uncertainty. Like when you were in the middle of that, it could have been 6 months. I mean, like you said originally, a lot of people thought it was going to be like an extended spring break. And then it turned into like a month. And then it turned into, well, the rest of the season is canceled. And then it turned into the next season is canceled. And so at that time, you don't know if you're going to return to basketball like ever at the time. Looking back, yeah, obviously we can have kind of 2020 vision and be like, okay, yeah, it was a year off and this and that. But nobody knew really for sure what was going on. So as far as mental health is concerned, because COVID had a pretty big impact on mental health, and then the injury that you had earlier probably impacted your mental health. You've mentioned that your mental health played a major role in your development as a person and as a basketball player. So can you talk about what that journey looked like a little bit as you went through each one of these chapters of your college basketball career?
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of those experiences in my first 4 years of school led to my master's degree being a little bit more focused research wise on sports psych. Like, I think I took a class my junior year, which was like kinesiology 321 maybe, or maybe 319. It was a sports psych class. And I was like, this stuff exists, like these terms, this literature, like I didn't even know that was even a world. I knew sports psych was a term, but I was definitely exposed to a lot of like the mental health struggles when I had my sophomore year and my injury. But it played a huge role. Like a lot of it came back to that identity stuff that you were mentioning before, like really tying a lot of like self-worth and validation and all of those things that you get from a sport and being good at it. A lot of that was tied directly to basketball. And yeah, I felt like, leading up to those times, whether it was the injury or COVID, like if I can't excel on the basketball court, like what else can I do? How else? Not as much like, can I get people to like me, but also like, how can I take up space and be myself in social scenarios, professional scenarios, academic? So it was good. Like at the time, it was painful and challenging, and definitely felt like very uncertain about a lot of things. Like feathers were ruffled, but the injury, and I'll kind of combine the two with COVID, but it was just a good time to like be reflective, dig a little bit deeper. Why was I having such a hard time with it? Like kind of try to pursue answers. One, I don't have to tie myself so closely to a sport and I can still be good at it. I think a lot of people think they have to be so invested in it and associate the identity with it, and that's what makes them good. But stepping away from that, where it's like you don't have to have a scarcity mindset. That's something that we talk about in some of these higher education classes in sports psych. But you don't have to be like, well, I got to be this way in order for me to be good at this thing. Like you could be yourself and your entire self and still perform at a high level. And sometimes you can even find that you're going to perform at a higher level because you're not associating yourself so heavily with your identity in sport, or even academics. This doesn't have to just go for athletes. Like if you're a big time academic and you're scoring amazing on all your tests and going to get your doctorate or whatever it may be. I just think like those were very important times for me to realize basketball has gotten me to all of these amazing places and it deserves all of that credit, but it's not the end all be all. It'll come to an end, as it has, for the last 2 years I haven't played. And it's just a great thing to be grateful for, but it doesn't have to be my entire world,
Yeah, so that actually leads me perfectly into the next question, which is to talk about the end of your college playing career, because that's oftentimes something that a lot of athletes struggle with mentally, is that loss of identity. Now, we've already talked about this a couple of times, and it sounds like you, I believe, in my experience working with athletes, had or have a better mindset about your identity as an athlete. But with regards to that specific question, as you got closer to the end of your college career, you knew that you weren't going to go to play professionally, I assume. You can talk about that if you want.
I knew it.
But yeah, so you knew it. So how did you process the idea of leaving competitive basketball behind? Was it a smooth transition, or did it take you some time to kind of come to terms with the fact that that chapter of your life was over?
Kind of both. Like it took some time, but I would say it was smoother than a lot of athletes experience, because athletes' careers end for a variety of reasons. It could be a huge injury. It could be you realize that you can't make it professionally. You could be trying to make it professionally for years and realize this isn't working. You could get cut, all different types of things, like family issues. You may have to like leave the sport. But for me, it was a blessing, because as I stated before, a lot of my people, friends, teammates were on the 5-year track and they were going to finish school, finish their playing careers in 2022, right? So I knew that I was going to be in school until 2023 because I had to finish my master's program. So when a lot of people after that 5th year of school graduated, moved to other cities, started to do their thing, I was left with a really great and valuable year to myself where I had to finish my program, lead my team as best as I could, and try to win some games, and start to look forward towards what was going to be next. So I'm like a big planner. I think it's a good thing, but also it can like get me into trouble because I think so far ahead. But I like to plan things out and see things come in as they do. So I think I decided to move to Chicago in like December or January of my senior year. So that's like 8 months ahead. And a lot of people will wait, enjoy their time in college, and then once they graduate, either try to get a job through the family business or start applying to jobs that are somewhere related to their degree. I think that's a pretty reasonable thing to say about people that are finishing up school, whether it be athletes or not. But for me, I knew that I wasn't going to play professionally, right? Like you said. My body was also going through it because, like I said before, with D2, we don't have a million different resources, like massage therapists, dietitians, physical therapists that are part of the team. Like we did have athletic training staff and they did what they could, but the attentiveness and the ability to recover quickly, return from injury, like those things were a challenge for our department. We had a lot of athletes sustain injuries and have a hard time. So my body was in a tough spot in my last year of school. Like I was doing everything I could, cold plunges, doing the yoga classes at the rec center, trying to get in the hot tub as much as I could, stretching routines, all types of stuff just to get past that last year of sport. So I knew that my body wasn't holding up, and I was like, there's no way I can even if I wanted to, there's no way I could try to pursue playing after this. So the writing was on the wall, and I was able to accept that pretty quickly. And once the season was over, my last year, I will admit there was an element of relief because, practice day in, day out, traveling for games, competing at a high level in the games. It takes a toll mentally, physically. So it wasn't that hard to step away from it as it ended. Now, when I moved and the fall of 2023, I think, right? Yeah, 2023. When the time of year came back around where I would be preparing for a season, I was like, oh man, I'm not doing it this year, and it's all behind me. So that was challenging. And I kind of combat that by staying close to the game. I love watching the games with my brothers who I live with. I live with my 2 brothers. And I love, going to a sports bar and watching the games and getting animated and talking sports, and staying close to basketball. Going to games, Bulls games, Kings games. I realized that I needed to stay close to it after that first year away from school, because even though it's not all of my identity, it's a big part of it. Basketball will always be a big part, and that's something to be proud of. It's not something to weigh you down and be like, oh, yeah, I'm not just a basketball player. A big part of me was a basketball player for a long time, and I'm very happy about that, and I love the game. And when you step away from it, my experience was that I realized it wasn't only about me playing, it was about the sport in general. And I just love the sport. I played it for a long time, but that doesn't mean that I don't get to be a basketball fan anymore. Some people just play their sport and don't really watch the professionals do it or other colleges do it, and they just play it because they like playing it. I'm like a hoop head. I love basketball. So all of those factors definitely helped me transition away from the game.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you're just a basketball. You're just passionate about basketball, and you played for a long time. You love the game, and you're still able to love the game now as of the recording of this podcast, the NBA playoffs just started. So unfortunately, the Chicago Bulls got eliminated from the playoffs. But nonetheless,
So
you're
the Kings.
probably still. What's that?
So did the Kings. The Kings are my team.
Sacramento Kings.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you're still watching playoff basketball. There's actually games happening right now. I'm a Lakers fan. Well, I'm a Lakers fan by proxy because I'm a LeBron James fan. You could probably see the artwork up there. I actually painted that in a class at Chico State. Actually, I was fully enrolled, and enrolled in an art beginning artwork class at Chico State. So I painted that. But yeah, I'm a huge basketball head as well. So I definitely understand where you're coming from there. I only played basketball up through high school. I never played in college, but it sounds like you were able to graciously transition out of the game. You kind of knew, like you said, the writing was on the wall. Physically, your body wasn't ready to continue playing anymore, and that's okay. It actually, as you were saying that, it makes it that much more impressive that these guys can play at a professional level for even 1 year, let alone multiple years, let alone, speaking of LeBron James, year 2022. Yeah. The guy's 40 years old, still playing like he's in college. Very impressive, no matter what your stance is on whether you like him or not.
Yeah, it's insane.
Insane what he's doing physically. But speaking of basketball, let's take a break from the mental performance questions and kind of have like a halftime break here. So we opened with a couple of fun questions about your personality to get to know you. I want to ask a couple of more questions here, and maybe I'll answer as well to some of these just so that we can get a little bit of insight both ways here.
Let's do it.
But speaking of basketball, if your basketball career were made into a movie, who's playing you and what's the title of the movie?
I have no idea who's playing me. Like, it's hard to like put yourself in those shoes because like if this was like if I was a famous basketball player, then maybe I could think of an actor who's like on the same tier, maybe a little
sure,
like, celebrity wise. But as far as I have no idea who's playing me. Like I always like to compare myself to Gordon Hayward as far as like playing style and
okay.
Just like all the parts of his game. I tried to model myself after him. But as far as the title, that's hard, but it's a good question because, like, how do you choose a couple words to try to describe, like, a whole story? And I think something along the lines of, like, the value of the journey, maybe, could be a good title.
I was going to go with Air Brennan. Because it's Air Bud. Are you a dog guy?
I am a dog guy. I don't think Air Bud, is that a movie?
Air Bud, I think, is the movie with like the dog that like hits the ball up into the basket. I could be totally wrong about that, but that's actually what came to my mind. So
I don't think I've seen it, so I cannot confirm. But I'll trust you. I'll trust you. But
okay.
Yeah, I mean, Air Brennan works too. But I don't know if I deserve that much credit because my mind goes to Air Jordan, and it's like, whoa,
yeah,
that's.
Hey, I went to a couple of Chico State games. I saw you throw down like a windmill dunk or two. Like you can get up there.
I have my moments. Yeah.
All right. Next question. What is one word or phrase that your coach used way too much?
He had a bunch that he used all the time. I was just thinking about this the other day. What I mean, there's like he was hyper competitive, and he would do everything he could to get us fired up, and it worked all the time because he was a very inspiring person, and like he would use terms like foaming at the mouth, like competitive wise, just to be like, that's what you should work yourself into.
Get yourself into a rabid frenzy, basically.
Pretty much. And we would say that to each other as teammates, like sometimes serious, but most of the time like, oh yeah, like that's just the Coach Clink saying. But another one that he would use a ton was the word urgency. And I don't know if I can say he like overused it because one word to get that message across, like to compete with urgency, to hold yourself with urgency, like get things done, attack it. Like you have to repeat that word a lot for it to like, get itself through some of our thick heads. So I wouldn't say that he way overused it, but he did say it a lot, and it was a good lesson because when you do it day in day out, practice game, like you can get a little bit complacent, a little bit lazy, let the details slide, and he always urged like urgency, make it happen, do it with like attentiveness, intentionality, and don't just like we said at the actually very beginning of the recording, don't just go through the motions. That was big with him.
Okay. Next question. What is the most random thing a fan ever yelled during a game that you still remember?
I would get like super hyper fixated on the game. So pretty much all the time, like there would be like after the game, one of my teammates or like one of my family members that I would see, they're like, did you hear that like commotion or that crazy fan that was yelling at the refs or something like that? And I'd be like, no, like it probably could have been the loudest thing ever, and I would have just been blind to it because I would get like very tunnel vision on the game itself, and feel like if I got pulled away from it, it would distract me and put me in a worse spot. It wasn't a fan, but when I was younger, I was competing in a 3-on-3 tournament, and I did have like a opposing player that was guarding me, and he was trying to like, I think I picked up the dribble, and he was like yelling the word monkey and like waving his arms to try to get me to turn the ball over. So I know it's not a fan moment, but like
sure,
that was a weird one that I never forgot.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. It was just like monkey. I was like, whoa, what are you doing right now?
Oh, did it work? Did you turn it over? Or were you just like, what is this guy even talking about?
No. It was caught me off guard, but I was like, I'm not turning the ball over because of that.
Yeah, for sure. All right, next question, and maybe this is the same answer, but what's your I can't believe that actually happened story from college hoops? And this could be on or off the court. So maybe just something weird that happened at Chico State.
Similar like perspective because I was so like focused on the games. The leaving San Diego due to COVID, like that was because we drove down there, went to sleep. We were a little worried about what would happen because there was teams pulling out of the D1 March Madness tournament. But when we woke up the next day, like our coach brought us to his hotel room and was like, guys, season's over. So couldn't believe that was happening in the moment.
Yeah.
That was a crazy one. And then the only other thing I could think of is San Bernardino, Cal State San Bernardino is in our division or conference, and they had a crazy mascot. It was the funniest person ever. And I don't even know if it was like a hired mascot of the school, but like it was like a very enthused fan, and they would get decked out in like the coyote blue and white and like wear a cape and like run up and down the sidelines. And it was a very strange person, and me and my teammates would just laugh about it because like they weren't super effective at like distracting players, but whoever this enthusiastic fan was, it was a sight to behold. Like they would do like the worm down the sideline and like cartwheel and like just a bunch of crazy stuff. It was hilarious.
You and your teammates were looking over there like just like, are you seeing this guy? Like, what the hell?
And mainly like, especially when we had, I think it was the CCA tournament, like we're sitting in the stands watching, the two teams play. That was when I peeped it the most because like I wasn't worried about our team. We were just sitting in the stands. But yeah, like we would definitely look at each other and be like, what is going on the sidelines over there?
Yeah. Okay, last question. Who was the sleeper funniest guy on the team? In other words, someone who didn't say much, but he would randomly like say one thing and you would just all like die laughing because it was just like totally out of left field. And like, what did he say? Like, do you have any recollection of that?
We had like clowns on the team. Everyone was funny. And if you weren't funny when you showed up, like you kind of had to find your way to be a part of the jokes. And like, because I mean, I'm sure for some, like, I'm not saying I'm a super, super funny person, but like I was kind of able to find my way within the team jokes. But if you couldn't, like, I would imagine it felt like a little bit of a like outside looking in kind of thing. So that just goes to say most of the team was outspoken and not super quiet. But we did have Kevin Warren and Kelvin Wright Jr. Those two guys weren't super outspoken, but they were extremely funny people. Like they would see everything going on, and then like you just said, make one small comment that's just like, okay,
Everybody
that
would
guy
just be
got
like
us.
dying laughing, like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but they were quiet people, you know, like the coaches would always try to get them to smile, always try to get them to laugh, and they would just like this. But they did
They were
have some
just
good
kind of all
remarks.
about their business. They let their work do the talking kind of thing.
Yeah, and especially with Kev, because me and Kev were like roommates, but also like our doors were right next to each other, so we shared a wall. So the amount of like jokes, like I could say like the references, but it wouldn't make any sense because it's like between me and him. But
Yeah,
he would have
inside
some like,
jokes.
yeah, he would have some kickers that are just like, okay, he's actually hilarious instead of just
Yeah,
being deadpan.
yeah, yeah. All right. So you mentioned during your time at Chico State that you did something that was pretty personally meaningful to you, and that was to intern with the university and help kind of spotlight mental health resources for students, generally speaking, and or specifically student athletes. So what inspired you to step into that role and kind of talk about that journey for me, if you would?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you asking because that was one of the things that I used to fill my time in that sixth year because, you know, like socially, you spend 6 years in Chico, you're still down to go have some fun and like go out, but it gets old. And so the internship was really great because I was able to work for Shannon Hall, who was at the time our like student success coordinator. So helped with a ton of academics for the athletes, you know, transcripts, making sure they're in the right classes, even like just having an open door policy to her office. Like if she wasn't in a meeting, athletes could come in, sit with her, hang out, you know, talk, whatever they needed to do in between practice and classes. So she was great. We had Malik Duffy, who's a year older than me. He interned with her and did more of like the academic stuff. He was like an assistant to her and helped with getting every student athlete like the right classes and keeping records of stuff. I can't remember exactly the extent of what he did, but I wanted to do the same thing just as like a good internship for my last year in school, but she wanted someone that was going to be able to do 2 years with her, and I was on my last year. So, like, luckily enough, she didn't just say, no, I need someone that can be here for 2 years. She was like, all right, well, what else can we do? Like, if you want to intern with me and be a part of like the office in the Acker Stadium and do something, then let's figure it out. So I literally met with her and our strength coach, Colin Kokenauer, and spoke about what is the need, what is something that could be valuable for a year, like how can I be of service, basically. And I ended up writing my own job description of the internship, submitted it to Shannon. She created a official position as an internship within the athletic department. And
This was an unpaid internship, or was this paid?
this was paid, but it was minimal hours throughout the week. Like it was not, it was just a very like, I think 20 hours, if that, maybe 15. Um, and we got the internship approved, and the title of it was Student Athlete Wellbeing Intern. And the focus was basically to be a part of staff meetings, bring awareness, because we had a great senior or a master's project done by Nadia Torkman, who is a track athlete, and her, I think, capstone, I believe, was her project, and she did. Oh my gosh, what was the title of it? I prefaced it, and now I'm trying to remember. Something with mental health stigma. Um, she had a very remove the stigma, maybe something along those lines. She had a very good title for it, and she did like a photography campaign for it. Got the athletes in their garb, brought a lot of awareness to mental health in the collegiate student athlete community. And I kind of just kept that going. I didn't run the actual project, but the spirit of it was how I created the internship. So another thing that kind of lighted my fire for it was, I think between the years 2020 and 2022, we had a couple like significant stories in collegiate athletics of athletes taking their lives. We had a Stanford goalie. I think there was a Nebraska lineman, and there was a few others. And I wish I could remember their stories and their names, but I saw that and I was like, dude, like I can't imagine seeing a story of a Chico State athlete taking their life. Like that's unimaginable for me. Like, I want to at least contribute to preventing that. So I got to work. I can't remember the first like couple things I did. It was just, I helped reorganize like our mental health page on the athletics department website. Just putting together resources, good links, good information about just general student athlete mental health. So we got to work on the website so that we could have a good imprint and representation. And then the two main projects that I did that I'm super proud of. The first one was we did, and we can even link the video to this podcast if you want, because it was a great project. We put together a media campaign, which campaign's a big word, but it was basically a video, and it was maybe 5 or 6 minutes long. And we picked a student athlete for each resource to read a very short script in front of the camera. And we highlighted the student health center, the rec center, because the rec center was not just weights. You know, like students could use that for yoga classes, for spin class.
They had like ping pong. They had the pool, the hot tub.
Yeah, like community type of things.
Yeah,
they also ran like the adventure.
Friends.
Yeah, they also ran like the outdoors adventure program.
Oh yeah, and they did like stand-up paddle boarding. They did hiking. Yes. So it sounds like this internship was, sorry to cut you off. A big part of it was highlighting student athlete resources that they could take advantage of to aid in their mental health. Is that about right?
100%. That's perfectly put. Like the rec center was actually my role. Like I spoke in the video on the rec center. But like the rec center, even though it's just like a bunch of college kids taking creatine and pre-workout, like that's a big part of it. But during my rehab, like I would go to PT. I didn't practice with the team because I was hurt. So I would go to the rec and I would work out, and I would just kind of like pump some weights, do the exercises for my knee and lower body. And I would walk out of there feeling better than when I walked in. And so I thought it was, that was a resource that was very important to highlight. Like a lot of kids go to college and they're homesick, or they're not making friends, or they're having a hard time. And the gym, as we both know as trainers, like the gym is an amazing space to work through those things, to improve yourself, to get a good sweat, to exert yourself, and just kind of take up space in that environment. So
develop social connections, find like-minded people, place to, relax and unwind. I know, exercise is technically kind of an activating thing, but I personally find it to be like, it's a good stress release valve, right?
100%.
You can, if you're feeling some kind of way, like angry, sad, upset, stressed, anxious, like I can think of probably no better way to productively channel those emotions than to exercise.
There isn't a better way, like straight up. I'll say it. I mean, therapy's great. And I think it's like a 1A, 1B, or maybe both are like equal. But
yeah,
for the common person that is just having a tough time, like relationship issues, whatever it may be, that's a great place to just do something productive and channel it. So coming back to it, we highlighted the health center, which, you didn't just go to when you were sick, which all students thought that. You could use that as like your provider, like your on-campus health. So we had the health center, we had the rec center, we highlighted the counseling center, which the counseling center was very tucked away. They did a decent job, like putting up posters and making people aware that it was available, but like no one from the student athlete community was going to the counseling center to get counseling, therapy, free sessions. When you're an adult, you have to pay for those things.
They didn't even know that was an option, right?
No,
not in a lot of cases.
Like, if they did know, it was only because when you did your orientation on the first day of school or the first weekend, all the athletes are brought together in like a large classroom, and they take you through all the paperwork and all the NCAA stuff. So if they knew about it, it was because maybe our head athletic trainer was like, "Hey, we have a counseling center," and that was it, right?
Like one sentence, and you're being bombarded with so much information. You're meeting so many people. Like,
right.
You probably don't feel like you need it at the time, so you're just like, "Oh yeah," and then you like immediately forget about it.
Exactly.
But I personally took advantage of all of these resources. I worked at the rec, worked out at the rec, went to the health center, took advantage of the counseling center. So I could speak firsthand of how valuable these are. So you were highlighting all of these for the athletes, reorganizing the website, getting everybody to be aware that these resources existed.
Yeah. Yeah. And we even did like the pantry, like people who are food insecure.
Another good one.
Yeah. Like we did the Wildcat food pantry. I used it, like I'm low on bread and I don't want to go to the grocery store. I'll go pick up a loaf of bread, or like some fruit, like anything, because when you're away from home, like maybe you didn't grocery shop growing up and you're like, I don't know what to do here. So we highlighted the pantry. We also highlighted like it wasn't the counseling center. They had a separate like response team center for like sexual harassment and anything related to that. So that was, I think the funding got cut or something like that. Of course it did, because like the most important things they cut the funding for, but we highlighted that resource, and it all culminated to be a great video that was shared not only on like our student athlete or athletics department like website and Instagram, but it was shared on the Chico State Instagram and website. So that was a super great project. We got a bunch of support from like the campus media team, and they shot all the videos. So that was really great.
Cool. Actually, I will definitely, if you can get me the link to that, I'll post it in the description for this video. And while we're talking about links to things, this is usually a question I ask during the course of the podcast. Do you have any personal links or professional links that you would like for me to include? Instagram, training programs, website, anything else that you would like me to highlight? I can include the links of in the description.
Sure. Like if you want to put my fitness Instagram, Move with Brennan, that one's great. I haven't put a lot of time into it, but eventually I will. It'll be something I update constantly. And then you'd always put my LinkedIn, because I know that like the professional space when you're in college, you're like, I remember going through it myself. It was like, can I connect with people from my same university? I don't know this person very well, or this professor, like there's a lot of uncertainty, but like once you graduate Chico and you're working and you get a LinkedIn request from someone that went to Chico, you're like, oh yeah, like accept right away. So anyone who listens and wants to like connect professionally, I'm down for it. So you could probably do those too.
Yeah. I'll get the links from you after we're done, and I'll put them in the description.
Sweet. And then wrapping up on the internship thing, the last thing that I did, we had done the same event, I believe, when I was maybe a sophomore or junior, potentially even a freshman, but they held like it was called Chat with the Cats, and they had 4 alumni come in and do a panel. So there was an MC, and they basically had 4 alumni athletes that went to Chico sit up on the stage, and they brought the whole athletic department, faculty and students in a room. I think it was in like Calusa Hall or something like that. And they basically just interviewed the alumni and talked about professional stuff, what they dealt with it when they were an athlete and a student. And so I benefited from that when we did it, because we had a basketball player come back, and he was super articulate and helpful. And it's also a great way to give back to your community when you are an alumni. And so we hadn't done it for a while, and COVID was a big reason. Like people weren't able to do it simply out of like rules, so people weren't necessarily stepping up. But I wanted to do it, and so we brought it back. We reached out to 4 alumni, had them come into town. I think we like took them out to lunch or maybe give them a gift basket, and then we had all the student athletes come, and we had questions prepared. We had a local therapist counselor that had been the head of the counseling center at Chico, and then she decided to run her own private practice. And she came in and emceed. She was incredible. I think her name was Junie. She was great. And it was just fun, you know, like we were able to get a lot of good insight from alumni who were in the exact same shoes that we were in.
Well, that sounds like it was a very fulfilling project for you. Certainly, still something that you hang your hat on today. Probably helped you develop a lot.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah,
Hang my hat on it.
helped you develop a lot of experience, you know, professionally, and it's a great way to stay connected. And you did a great service for the university by doing that, both while you were there and then also moving forward, because somebody else, I don't know, maybe took over your position for that internship role moving forward. If they didn't, like, that video still exists for people to look at, you know, as far as highlighting mental health resources. So that's really cool. Now, as far as kind of getting back to the athlete piece here, how do you stay connected to the athlete mindset now that you're done playing? Are you still training? Are you still competing in any way, or are you finding like any other outlets to kind of fill that athlete void?
That's a great question, because I think it's very relevant to a lot of ex-athletes who are like, do I even still try to do my job as I did as an athlete? Like, do I keep competing? A lot of people also like their training will fall off, and then they'll try to participate in like a men's league or women's league or co-ed, and they'll get hurt because their bodies are just like, we don't do this anymore. So personally, I definitely threw myself into fitness and the health world, just from doing the coaching and the training that I've been doing the last few years. So the fitness training is a big outlet for sure. Like, I'm a part of a CrossFit gym. I coach there on the weekends. And when I was doing full-time personal training, I was coaching maybe 6 classes a week, something like that. So the health and fitness world is definitely a huge part of how I continue to like milk the athlete side of things. I definitely still don't see myself as like a high-level basketball player, but I still very much treat myself like an athlete. I try to eat right, overly prioritize hydration, you know, the recovery stages of stuff, the rehab, prehab, like all the little things that I know I need to do to keep my body working the way I want it to. And then as far as the sport, like, I, regardless of basketball, like, love playing sports with friends. And so I play in a league Tuesday nights with a couple of guys. And so we get up and down every week. And it's just fun, you know, like the competition level does not matter to me. It's just fun, you know, to get out there, have fun with guys. Like, a lot of them also didn't play at the level I did. Like, they're just playing because they like to play, which is a really fun environment. Like, people aren't worried about being perfect. They're just getting out there having fun for an hour. And then in Chicago, we have Chicago Sports Social Club. So that's just basically like the city recreation department. And they put on like leagues for kickball and volleyball and basketball. And so I played volleyball all last summer out on the beaches by the city. And then I'm going to do that this summer again. So all in all, just like trying to stay active, play sports, have fun, like stay connected with that general world.
Okay. So speaking to that, what does balance look like for you now? So mentally, physically, and emotionally, after everything you've been through with the injuries and the COVID, the grad school, moving to Chicago, doing what you're doing now professionally, what does balance look like for Brennan right now?
It's funny because like I used to think up until recently like that was critical to have balance with social life, professional like pursuits, family. Family still, it's gonna stay number one over everything. But I also recently heard like a couple different speakers, like Scott Galloway, and then I can't remember her name, but she was she's a very successful like businesswoman, and they were speaking about how balance is kind of a buzzword and it's a little bit overrated when you're trying to do something that's important to you. And I think that actually is really insightful because balance, yeah, it's important because like you want to have, your mental clarity, stay even keeled, be able to handle a lot of different scenarios and environments. Um, and build those mental skills, as we're on this podcast talking about, mental health and sports psych. But um, for me, balance is literally all about doing the things that I like to do and trying to fulfill potential. So, like, professionally, what I want to eventually do is go to PT school and work as a physical therapist. That's the goal right now. Um, and that's a pretty lofty goal, like those, it's tough to get through a program and then work. And yeah, balance is important because like, you want to keep your social aspect, your friends around you, maintaining those relationships also with your family. Um, but when you got to go all in on something, you got to go all in on it. So, um, balance, obviously I have to exercise, keep my body in a good state. Right now I have some goals. Last year I was able to compete in High Rocks, which is a racing competition for those that don't know. And that's a really fun outlet. That actually kind of goes back to the last question, like how I stay involved as an athlete. So like the fitness and exercise is also like incredibly important to me because it contributes to the other areas. Like I need to stay strong, good energy levels, and be able to do the things that I need to do in my varied environments. But like balance, I try, but things aren't always balanced. Like some things are always like taking precedent over other things. So you just kind of go with the wave and take it one day at a time.
Okay. So it sounds like you're able to maintain some semblance of balance through what I'm going to classify as like imbalance. And what I mean by that is you have some things that are very important to you in your life, right? Maybe that's your job. Maybe that's your education. At a time, it was playing basketball. So that word balance, like you said, is kind of a buzzword, right? And if we imagine sort of one of those golden scales where we have like, gold on one side and lead on the other, right? And it's perfectly balanced. I think that that's kind of a hogwash ideology, and you might agree with me. Here's why. Because balance doesn't have to mean everything is perfectly 50%, 50%, or 33%, 33%, 33%. Balance to me, and it sounds like to you, means that we're prioritizing the things that are important to us, and those things are going to take up more time than other things. But it sounds like even though you have these things that are very important to you that are taking up the lion's share of your time, you still have other things that are helping to keep you in balance, like your family, your social circle, playing games with your friends on the weekends. These are things that help us avoid burnout. So everything is not perfectly balanced in terms of the amount of energy and time that we spend participating in them, but you still have some things sprinkled in that help keep you like leveled out. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I actually think that's a very articulate way of putting what I said because you're 100% right. Like the things that are important to us, we put time into it. Some people it's all about the job. Some people it's all about travel. Some people it's all about like hobbies. But yes, like, and maybe that's where the buzzword and the bullshit comes from. But like, if you tell a student athlete in their second or third year in school, like try to keep everything balanced, stay even keeled, like give energy to a bunch of different things. It sometimes can be perceived as like I need to have everything level with like that scale that you were saying. And maybe that's just not what we mean. And maybe that's where we kind of get off on the balance thing. Because what we really mean, I feel like, as professionals and in the working class, like the balance is you do the things, most of your time go towards the things that you want and you prioritize. And then the other things just don't get as much energy or as much time. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Looking back at your athletic journey, what do you wish that you had known earlier in your basketball career about mental health and identity?
That's a good question, because I'm definitely of the perspective and mindset that things happen for a reason. You learn from them, you improve. I wouldn't really want to change anything, because that's what's made me who I am today. It's cliche, but there's a reason, because when people say that, they're grateful for their journeys, and they understand that the good and the bad contribute to like the whole. But I don't know if there's any, like, I guess another way to phrase that same question would be like, if you could talk to your younger self, maybe, something like that.
Yeah, basically.
I think probably the easiest way is like, it's all going to be all right. Like it's going to work out, whether you stress about it all day or not. It took, like, I came across terms like be where your feet are, take it one day at a time, like those kind of things that bring you into the moment. More recent than like when I was in college, but stuff like that, like be present. It's going to work out whether you worry about it or not. Just like those reinforcing things, like the encouraging things where it's like, dude, it's all going to be fine. You don't have to like lose your mind over it. It's all good.
So sort of going back to tell your younger self, you wish that maybe you would have been a little bit more present or in the moment than you were at that time.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've actually, the more I've dug into like being present and not thinking too much about the past or the future, I actually think I did a good job of that. I just think that it was like a lot of stress that was not necessary. Like a good example of this is when my first year out of school, I came back to watch a game at Chico, and just sitting in the stands and not being on the court, on the sideline, in the thick of it, I was like, man, like I wish I would have been able to just kind of like play free and just relax a little bit. Like it's not the end of the world. One play or one game. When I was sitting in the stands, I was like, man, this really isn't that hard. You don't have to make it harder than it needs to be. And a lot of the times I would get very, I said this before, hyper fixated and very like intense about the specific moment, which you do need a high level of intensity and focus. But, like that can get in the way of performance if it makes you tight and it makes you worried about a mistake. When those things, in order to be successful, like you kind of got to play free and rely on your ability, your practice. And when you're in competition, you can't really worry about the outcomes.
So maybe just try and have a little bit more fun with it.
Yeah, probably that.
I mean, it makes sense, right? Obviously, you want to perform as well as you can, and it's better to be, I think, more focused than less focused. I don't think it would have done you any favors or reflected well on who you were or had a positive impact on your performance if, let's say, when you were playing, you were paying more attention to the guy who's doing the worm down the sideline on the other side than you were paying attention to what was going on in the game. But at the same time, I mean, you even hear this at the professional level where guys, it's recommended, like, you even hear them kind of say it to each other, like, have fun, man. Like it's a game at the end of the day. Like basketball is a game. And a lot of these athletes, professional, sort of reflecting either after their career or in the middle of their career, have this realization that, yeah, they make a lot of money and there's a lot of pressure on them to do what they do. But at the end of the day, like, they're playing a game.
Right.
So, and what are games supposed to be? Fun. Right? So, yeah, if you're a professional athlete, it's your job. And if you're a student athlete, like maybe you have a scholarship and you feel like it's your responsibility to play as hard as you can and really be in it. But like at the end of the day, like maybe what I'm hearing you say is your advice to your younger self, or maybe to other younger athletes who are going through now what you went through a few years ago, is like, have fun with it, right?
Yeah. Loosen up a little bit, enjoy yourself. Like, you'll, a lot of people will say that like those are the best years of your life. And I don't know if I really believe in that. They're probably the most fun because you don't have a lot of like responsibilities about paying for things and the monies,
Like adult responsibilities, so to speak.
which suck. Yeah, which suck. But
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, they're not fun. But yeah, like just some people, and I'm speaking for myself when I say some people, like you take it so serious that it can get in the way of like your success, your enjoyment, your presentness. Um, some people don't take it serious enough, and then coaches get on them. Let's focus. Let's really give better effort. I
Let's
was
have
always
some urgency.
Yeah, exactly. But I was always like so serious, like so invested, and that's a good thing. But it can, if it's to the max, it can get in the way of the things we're talking about, where it's like relax, have fun, play free, like don't let those things get in the way. So yeah, have some fun, enjoy it, take some time to relax.
And you might even play better if you're a little bit more relaxed. I mean,
Yes.
scientifically, right, from a biomechanics standpoint, you probably know this having gone through a kinesiology program. Like they say that the athlete, like let's take a sprinter, for example. They actually say that the sprinter who is instructed to sprint at about 90% of their max speed will run faster than the sprinter who's instructed to run at 100% of their max speed, which might sound a bit counterintuitive to think about. Like, well, wouldn't the sprinter who's running at 100% of their capabilities run faster than the one at 90%? And that's not necessarily true. And here's why. Because if you are maximally contracting 100% of your muscle mass, then you actually kind of interrupt the proper function of certain muscles that you want to be firing, because the agonist and the antagonist are sort of both firing at the same time, instead of one of them relaxing to let the other one do its job. So you can actually run faster if you're running at 90% exertion relative to 100% exertion. So the same thing could be true for basketball. Like you want to have 90 to 95% focus and intensity, but not 100%, because then you're maybe getting in your own way a little bit.
Yeah, and a lot of coaches, mine included, will be like, "Give me 100%," or they'll even do the like corny, "Give me 110%." When it's like, all right, well,
Sure.
110, come on. But it's true. Like one athlete, I've seen it with a lot of them, but one athlete comes to mind when I was watching the '08 Beijing Olympics. Apollo Ono, he's a skater, and when he was doing his warm up laps, he would be yawning, and then he would get interviews where it's like, "What, are you tired? Like, are you calm? Are you like not like fired up?" And he would be like, "No, like that's my ritual to relax myself, calm, and perform at the level that he needs to." And I thought it was super interesting. I was 9 years old at the time, so I don't know how it stuck with me, but like the guy who's a world class Olympic gold medalist is yawning as he's doing his warm up laps right before his competition. And I think that speaks volumes, where it's like, yes, you got to be focused. You got to do all those things that every athlete needs to do to perform. But there still has to be some leeway where you can let your talent, your ability, your practice carry you and not have to be so tense,
Yeah, I mean, from a sports psych perspective, we would call that the zone of optimal performance, or the zone of optimal functioning.
Flow.
Yeah, flow state by any number of other terms. The inverted U theory, if we want to get sort of theoretical about it, and what that is just briefly, and then we'll move on. But just because we're talking about it, right? If you are too under aroused, like you just got up from a nap, like you have zero arousal, you're probably not going to perform your best. You're zoned out. You're distracted. You're paying attention to fans, Lord knows what else. You're thinking about what you're going to eat after the game, who knows what. Like, you're probably not going to perform your best. And if you're over activated to the point of like anxiety and heart slamming in your chest, and you're just like sweating bullets before you're even in the game. You're listening to music that's way too overactivated. You're too tense. That's also not going to do you any favors. But somewhere in the middle is a level of activation, and this is different for every person, will be your zone of sort of optimal functioning. And to your example, Apollo Ono, maybe he didn't want to be too overactivated, so he was kind of like yawning to like activate his parasympathetic nervous system. Let's chill out a little bit, because those high pressure, high stress situations, the Olympics, the whole world is watching, like you don't want to be too overstimulated, because he knew that it was going to be detrimental to his performance. And so that's basically what that's all about.
Yeah, that's a perfect explanation. The inverted U theory is what I was thinking of. And I kept thinking bell-shaped curve, but I was like, there's a theory, and inverted U is what it is. And I think it's so relevant. And that's not a part of a pregame speech. That's not a part of, training or practice. Like, you kind of got to figure that out, unless you have, and you're fortunate to have a sports psychologist part of your team, or you came across that in some manner. But it's a fact, because not only do we know it scientifically, but like you can see it when you are aware of those principles and theories. You can see that when you watch competition. And it perfectly said, it's different for everyone. So you may see someone like Draymond Green or Dylan Brooks who's just like 10 out of 10 fired up all the time, or like Pat Bev, like he's a good example.
11 out of 10, honestly. Yeah.
Like so much. But shit, at the end of the day, they're making millions of dollars playing at the highest level of basketball. And so
that works for them.
Yeah, like that works for them. And who knows, maybe they would play better if they were like 95% intense. But we'll never know that, because they're doing it professionally. But like other players, gosh, I'm trying to think. Like DeMar DeRozan is an example. Like he ties his shoes really loosely. Like he hardly even ties his shoes. And he's very like even keeled. There's other players I'm trying to think of. But like if you watch enough sports, not every player is going to be fire coming out of their ears, nostrils flaring, freaking out about.
They almost look like they don't even care.
Yep.
As compared to some of these other athletes. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is one that comes to mind.
That's a great example.
Very, very even keel, doesn't really show emotion too much.
Kawhi Leonard.
Hardly ever see him like yelling at or complaining to the refs. He just goes about his business. Probably going to win the MVP of the NBA this year.
He should.
Led the league in scoring, and he's just like very. He almost just looks like chill, like unbothered.
Yeah. He's a really good example, and I think an old-fashioned way to look at it, which I think a lot of coaches, coming back to that like pregame speech and what they expect of their players, is to expect like the 100% intensity. But there's a reason in teams there's roles, and there can be a role of like an instigator, a leader by example who's fired up and has that impact on the team. And then you have like your top dog leader like a Shai or Kawhi Leonard, who's just kind of doing his thing, leads by example, guides everyone where they needs to be, and they bring like a level of calmness to the squad.
And you need both for the same reason that we were just talking about, that inverted U theory. You need some guys to fire the team up, and you need some guys to calm the team down.
Yes. 100%.
All right. So as we get close to wrapping up here, I wanted to just ask if there's anything else that you wanted to mention that we hadn't yet talked about today that maybe you thought we would, or anything you wanted to discuss?
We've covered a lot of good stuff. I don't think anything. I didn't really have a whole lot of expectation. Like I just knew that you would have a good format and we'd run with it. So nothing comes to mind as far as something I wanted to touch on.
Okay, I've got one last question for you that we're going to kind of leave off on, and it kind of is pertaining to the mental health initiatives, the internship that you had at Chico State. So you've already made a really big impact with that internship that you had for those student athletes. How do you hope to keep, sort of paying it forward to the next generation of athletes. Do you have a message that you want to leave them with, whether it pertains to mental health or mental performance? What sort of message do you want to leave for the next generation of athletes moving forward?
I think as far as what I am hoping to do, like I want to stay close to the game of basketball and I want to try to take the medicine practice to a place where I can be with the team as a team physical therapist, team doctor type of situation. One, because I think a lot of my skills are leading towards that route professionally, but also because I love the sport. Like any career that I'll be in, I'll still be going to games and staying involved with that. But as far as a message, like I saw something recently, in the world of podcasting, Jay Shetty is huge. He's probably got the, I think, biggest health podcast in the world. But he had a really good way to bring himself into the moment and be present, which can be a challenge for a lot of people. And gosh, I hope I don't butcher it, but he's got like the 5-4-3-2-1 system. And if he needs to bring himself into the moment, he's like worrying too much about the future or the past. I believe, and we'll probably have to go back and confirm it, but he finds 5 things that he can see. It's basically the 5 senses. So 5 things he can see. I think it's maybe 4 things he can touch, like a sweatshirt, hat, hair, table, whatever. 3 things he can smell. 2 things that he can taste. It might have been 1 thing that he could taste. But the message is that, a routine or a system that can kind of calm the waters and bring you back to the present moment. Be where your feet are is another great term that I like to repeat to myself or tell other people. But those mental skills, whether you're experiencing adversity in your sport, school, family, work, those little things like internally that you don't necessarily have to share with the world. But hopefully one of those works for people to be able to kind of like pull themselves back, take a step back, and handle whatever comes their way.
Yeah, so I think essentially what you were referencing there is kind of like a mindfulness technique.
Yes.
So kind of like getting in touch with the present moment, whether it's what you can hear, whether it's what you can see, taste, touch. You're basically being in the present moment.
Yeah,
and
I'm
with
actually looking it up.
Yeah, with mindfulness specifically, it's being in the present moment non-judgmentally. Mm-hmm. So sort of just allowing yourself to be where you are with your thoughts and kind of calming down.
Yeah. I actually looked it up because I'm trying to get it right. So 5 things you can see, 4 you can touch, 3 that you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. So yeah, exactly like you said, like it's a mindfulness practice. And as I said earlier, the sports psych terms like mindfulness, mental performance, I was not exposed to those until I actually started taking academic classes. So it's not something with social media, it's more now, but it's not something that's brought up, I think, as you're an athlete. And then the other thing I would say is don't be afraid to like get into journaling and getting into like some practice that can help get things out, whether it be on a page or, writing songs or poetry or whatever it may be, like getting outside. Those types of practices are super, super helpful.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you brought up that example from, was it Jay Shetty, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And one of the big scopes of this podcast is to bring this information to light. Athlete experiences and then also mental performance techniques, because you just hit the nail on the head there. And I think you're one of the more informed athletes that I've worked with. I mean, you were in a kinesiology program and then you took some sports psychology classes. But this information is not as out there as the physical information is. Like from a young age, athletes are participating in sport and they're doing drills and athletes are getting into the weight room younger and younger, but the mental performance stuff is not as prevalent as I wish it would be. So that's kind of one of my goals for paying it forward to the next generation, because I was an athlete. I never played at the college level. You did, but your hope of bringing this sort of information to light is why I appreciate you taking the time to come here and talk to me today, and then also kind of having that wish that younger athletes are aware of techniques like mindfulness and journaling and even just sitting outside in the grass, going for a hike, going for a walk.
Grounding.
Those sorts of things are, grounding,
the best.
exactly. Those sorts of things. So definitely, with the help of this podcast and social media, which I link my social media in the comments of every podcast. So if anybody wants to check out my social media as well as Brennan's, I think we'll wrap up this episode here for today. Brennan, I really want to thank you for taking the time to chat with me today and share your experiences at Chico State and as a person at large. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course, man. I appreciate the platform. It's fun to talk shop and talk about experiences. And I think it's great. This podcast is only getting started. I'm sure, 12, 13 episodes will turn to 50 to 100 with no time. So keep going, keep doing what you're doing. And I mean, it's been a while, so it's nice to reconnect.
Absolutely. And maybe we'll do another episode in the future, but you're absolutely right. There will be more episodes to come from the All-Star Athlete podcast.
Wonderful.
So until the next time, enjoy the NBA playoffs. I'll catch you later.
Sounds good, man. Good to talk to you.
All right, man. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You as well.